Hello, everybody. This is your daily real estate exam practice question, and let's jump into it. It's is a doozy. This was one I went over in my real live person class today, and students really had a head scratcher. They were kind of trying to go through all the different scenarios, so let's jump right into it. X, Y, and Z, so three individuals, own a property as joint tenants. Z dies and Y sells his interest in the property to W. How is the property now owned? So, actually, before we even jump into it, let's kind of talk about what we're looking at here. So, what I would do before I even look at the answers, I would probably go through in my head what was owned, what happened when there was a death and a sale, because of what we have here. So, three people own property as joint tenants. So, we know a couple things about joint tenants, right? You have to have the four unities, okay, which are the unities of time, title, interest, and possession. So, I always abbreviated TTIP. Okay, so you have to have the four unities. You have to have time, title, interest, and possession. Okay, meaning that you have to take the property at the same time. You have to be on the same title. You have to have equal shares of interest, and you have to come into possession of the property at the same time. Okay, and when that happens, the benefit for joint tenancy is that you cannot devise, okay, or will your real property. So what happens is once one of those owners dies, their interest dissolves into the remaining owners. So right now, they each own 33.33333%. And then what happens is when one of them dies, the two of them will own it 50-50. Okay. So let's talk about what happens here. So in this example, X, Y, and Z own the property. Z dies. So we just talked about what happens when Z dies. So now X and Y own the property still as joint tenants, because what happens is that has not changed, okay? Because they had property as joint tenants, okay? They met the requirements, assumably, of time, title, interest, and possession. They had the four unities. So now X and Y own the property, okay? Right up to here, X and Y own the property as joint tenants, okay? Now, Y sells his interest. So Y sells his interest. Is that something that's absolutely possible? Yes, Y can sell their interest. So here's what happens, and they trip you up with this all the time. If there are two joint tenants, so we say X and Y, okay? There are two joint tenants. What happens is each of them can sell their interest. What they cannot do without the permission, knowledge, or consent of the other joint tenant is sell the entire property in totality. So what happens is they can sell their interest, though. The other thing they cannot do is devise their interest, because you have the right of survivorship, meaning that as soon as death occurs, testate law will not kick in. It will simply dissolve into the remaining owners because you've opted to take joint tenancy. So Y sells his interest to W. So now X and W own the property, but the question is, how do they own the property? So let's look at the answers. X and W own the property as joint tenants. Well, the answer to that is no, because they have not met the four unities. They have not met that requirement, because what happens is a couple of things are not going to work. X took title to the property on the original title with X, Y, and Z, so they wouldn't meet the unity of title. Time. They could meet the unity of interest, but they also would not meet the unity of possession, coming into possession of the property at the same time. Okay, so A, not good. Okay, B, as joint tenants, X, W, and Z's widow are the sole heirs. So we said that when Z dies, testate law does not come into play. So because they took property as joint tenants, you've given up the right to will your property. So Z's widows aren't going to come into property. Z's widow is not going to come into property with this, come into ownership with this property. So B is not the right answer. X and W are As tenants in common, each with interest. Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. We know what happens. When we hit the right answer, we double check and make sure that there's not a better answer. D, X and W and Y's wife. Uh, why would Y's wife come into it? Because he's not dying. Z died, right? So it's not the right answer at all. Okay, Y's wife would not come into it because it doesn't say that he sells it to his wife. They're just kind of just preying on the fact that that someone dies, and they're trying to. What they're trying to do. Here's the thing: we just spent a couple minutes doing this. You have the time to take a tricky question like this and explain it to yourself, kind of work it out in your head before you tackle the answers. And that's going to be the best way to tackle this kind of question. I hope you like that. And I hope you understand why the answer is exactly what it is. Have a great one, guys. And I'm going to see you tomorrow.